While Henry II had restored order in England, his ambitions extended across the English Channel. As Duke of Normandy and Anjou, he ruled more land in France than the French king himself. This made Henry's relationship with Louis VII of France one of constant rivalry and conflict. At the heart of their conflict was Henry's marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine in 1152. Eleanor had previously been married to Louis, but after their annulment, she married Henry just months later. With her, Henry gained Aquitaine, one of the wealthiest and most powerful duchies in France. By the mid-12th century, Henry's vast territories in France made him the dominant power in Western Europe. However, Henry was not content with simply defending his existing domains. He sought to extend his authority further. One of his primary targets was Brittany, a strategically vital but politically fragmented region that bordered his lands. Brittany, though technically a duchy under the nominal suzerainty of the French king, had long been known for its independence. Its rulers often acted autonomously, balancing their allegiances between England and France, depending on political necessity. For Henry, control over Brittany was essential for several reasons. First, it would secure the western flank of his Angevin empire, preventing any hostile force from using it as a base to attack his lands. Second, it would further tighten the grip he held over France, encircling the Caspian kingdom from the north and west. The opportunity to intervene in Brittany arose in 1156, following a succession crisis. The previous Duke of Brittany, Eudes de Port-Hoët, had been acting as regent for his young stepson, Duke Conan IV. However, Eudes attempted to seize power for himself, pushing Conan aside and claiming the duchy. This move led to a political crisis, as different factions within Brittany began aligning themselves with either Conan or Eudes. Henry, seeing a chance to assert his influence, threw his support behind Conan. Henry's interest in Brittany was also deeply personal. His younger brother Geoffrey had married Constance of Penthever, a prominent noblewoman from Brittany. This marriage gave Geoffrey a strong claim to influence in the region, and Henry sought to use this connection to extend his family's control. In 1156, Henry launched a campaign into Brittany using a combination of diplomacy and military force to crush Eudes's resistance. His army, consisting of troops from Normandy and Anjou, moved swiftly against Eudes's supporters, forcing them into submission. Conan regained control of the duchy. However, despite restoring Conan to power, Henry ensured that Brittany remained under his firm influence. After securing his dominance in Brittany, Henry turned his attention to Toulouse, a wealthy and strategically vital region in southern France. His claim came through Eleanor of Aquitaine, as Toulouse had historical ties to her duchy. However, it was ruled by Count Raymond V, a vassal of Louis of France. In 1159, Henry launched an ambitious military campaign to seize Toulouse, assembling one of the largest armies of his reign. As Henry's army advanced toward Toulouse, Raymond quickly realized that he could not withstand the attack on his own. Desperate for support, he turned to his feudal overlord Louis VII for protection. In a bold move, Louis personally entered Toulouse and took up residence in the city. This was a significant escalation, as it meant that any direct assault on Toulouse would be seen as an attack on the King of France himself. A direct assault on Toulouse risked triggering a much larger conflict, potentially uniting other French nobles against him. Faced with these risks, Henry hesitated. While this decision prevented an immediate diplomatic crisis, it was widely seen as a military failure for Henry. After the Toulouse campaign, tensions between Henry and Louis remained high. Their next major conflict centered on the Vexin, a crucial border region between Normandy and France. The Vexin had long been a disputed territory. It was originally controlled by the French crown, but had been promised as part of the dowry of Margaret of France, the infant daughter of Louis. She was betrothed to Henry's eldest son, Henry the young king, in a political arrangement meant to secure peace. However, Henry saw an opportunity to take advantage of the situation. In 1160, while Margaret was still a child, Henry arranged for an immediate marriage between her and his son, despite the fact that both were too young to consummate the union. This move, though legally questionable, allowed Henry to claim custody of Margaret and with her control of the Vexin. Louis VII was outraged. Seeing this as a power grab, he sought alliances, reaching out to other French nobles and strengthening his ties with the papal authority and the Holy Roman Empire. However, Henry's control over the Vexin remained secure, marking yet another victory in his ongoing struggle against the French monarchy. As Louis's influence waned, a new force was emerging. His young son, Philip Augustus, would one day prove to be a far more formidable adversary than his father. With his dominance in France secure for the moment, Henry turned his attention to consolidating power in England. One of his primary concerns was the growing influence of the Church, which often acted independently of royal authority. Henry sought to bring the English clergy under his control, leading to one of the most infamous conflicts of his reign, the struggle with Thomas Becket. To strengthen his hold over the Church, Henry appointed his close friend and trusted Chancellor Thomas Becket as Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162. Henry believed that Becket, who had been a loyal servant in secular affairs, would ensure that the Church remained loyal to the crown. However, this decision would prove disastrous. Once elevated to Archbishop, Becket underwent a dramatic transformation. He abandoned his lavish lifestyle, embraced monastic discipline, and became a fierce defender of church privileges. He clashed with Henry over clerical immunity, insisting that priests accused of crimes should be tried in church courts rather than under royal law. This directly opposed Henry's vision of a stronger, centralized monarchy where all subjects, including clergy, were answerable to the king's justice. Tensions escalated in 1164 when Henry introduced the Constitutions of Clarendon, a set of laws aimed at restricting church independence. These decrees asserted the king's authority over ecclesiastical courts, demanding that clergy be tried in royal courts for serious crimes. Becket refused to accept these reforms, challenging Henry's authority and seeking support from Pope Alexander III. Henry's clash with Thomas Becket over the Constitutions of Clarendon reached a breaking point. He was summoned to the king's court, where he was accused of treason and financial misconduct. Fearing for his safety, Becket fled to France, seeking protection from Pope Alexander and King Louis VII, Henry's longtime rival. For 6 years, Becket remained in exile, using his position to rally support against Henry. During this time, the Pope attempted to mediate, but neither Henry nor Becket would compromise. Henry, frustrated by Becket's influence, threatened to seize church lands in England, while Becket responded by excommunicating royal officials and placing England under the threat of interdict. By 1170, political pressure forced a reconciliation. Henry wanted his son, Henry the young king, crowned as his co-ruler, but this required the Archbishop of Canterbury's blessing. To resolve the deadlock, Henry allowed Becket to return to England. However, Becket's return was not one of submission. He continued to defy the king. Furious at Becket's defiance, Henry reportedly lashed out in a fit of rage, exclaiming, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Though the exact wording is debated, 4 of his knights, Reginald Fitzurse, Hugh de Morville, William de Tracy, and Richard le Breton, interpreted this as a command. On December 29, 1170, they stormed Canterbury Cathedral, confronting Becket as he prayed. Despite attempts to drag him outside, Becket stood his ground, refusing to submit. The knights struck him down at the altar, splitting his skull with their swords. The murder shocked Christendom, turning Becket into a martyr almost instantly. The fallout was devastating for Henry. Becket was canonized as a saint in 1173, and his shrine in Canterbury became one of Europe's most important pilgrimage sites. Henry, fearing excommunication and rebellion, was forced into public penance. In 1174, he walked barefoot to Canterbury Cathedral, where he was flogged by monks as a sign of repentance. Though Henry had emerged from the Becket crisis with his throne intact, his troubles were far from over. His vast empire required careful management, but his greatest threat came from within his own family. Henry's ambitious plans to divide his empire among his sons created deep resentment. His eldest son, Henry the young king, had been crowned as his co-ruler, but was given no real power. Meanwhile, his younger sons, Richard the Lionheart, Geoffrey, and John, grew restless, each demanding their share of authority. Adding to the tension, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Henry's formidable wife, felt sidelined and resented his treatment of their sons. At the same time, Louis VII of France, still seeking revenge for past defeats, manipulated Henry's sons against their father, offering them support in their grievances. With a fractured royal family and powerful enemies eager to exploit the divisions, the Angevin Empire stood on the brink of civil war. The stage was set for one of the greatest rebellions in medieval history, the Great Revolt of 1173 to 1174, where Henry would face betrayal from those closest to him.